Hi everyone, welcome back again. This is actually my fourth video on the Kabacoff code in chapter 2. And there are some important things I want to cover here in my last one. And I promise this will be my last 5-minute video on the Kabacoff book. We have a lot of other code, a lot of other statistics to cover on this channel together. But I want to scroll down near the bottom or maybe just near the middle of the Kabacoff code, because one of the most important things for you to begin to get a grasp of is the idea of a data frame. And a data frame is an object that's created in array that will have multiple vectors or multiple columns or multiple attributes or multiple variables, sometimes called predictor variables. So the terminology isn't quite standardized, but they all mean the same thing. You have something that looks somewhat rectangular, which has records on the left-hand side, and it has columns on the right. And that's exactly what we call a data frame. So this data frame is going to create a patient data frame. So we can imagine 4 patients in an office. We can imagine that we've learned their ages. They are all diabetics because maybe I'm a new young physician and I specialize in diabetes. And then I make an assessment of their initial condition as they enroll in my practice. And then I'm going to create a patient's data frame, and notice that it's going to have 4 columns or 4 attributes or 4 variables, etc. 4 predictor variables, thinking that I might do some regression later on. So let's just go ahead and see what we have. This should be an integer data type. This should be our numeric data type. And here we're going to have a character data type. And then the status is going to be just a little bit different, and we're going to look and see what that might be. So here we go. And then I'm going to create my data frame. And my data frame now looks like I'm hoping it would be. I have 4 columns, and they have a label because they were provided a label in the very beginning. And then I have 4 records identified as a number. So let's just ask ourselves a few questions. Let's ask ourselves, what kind of class is the patient ID? And how do I now examine that? So I'm going to go class, and I'm going to try one thing first. Let's try this in shorthand and then longhand. Let's do longhand. First, I'm going to tell that I want to look at the patient data frame, and I want to select the patient ID column, and this is how you normally do that. And I'm going to run this, and it should print out just one of the columns, and it will tell me the data tag, which we pretty much knew was going to be numeric. The other thing that I'm going to do is I am going to print out just the patient ID data. Let's just do that in the same way. Patient data, because that's the need of my data frame, $patient ID, and it should give us the very first column. Let's just check it out. And there it does. It gives me the first column. It gives me the name of the attribute, and it gives me the entries in the column. And then I'm going to try one thing. Let's try and see if I can do this just by shorthand, by typing in patient ID and see if it will work with shorthand notation. And it does. And part of the reason it does is because I've created this data frame within the framework of this particular project. Little later on, I'll show you how to deal with data frames that don't kind of come embedded in your project. And so shorthand becomes a little bit of a problem until you tell something to hour. But let's go on and look a little bit more. We can take the patient's data, and again, we can look at the first two data records, ID and age. And we can go to patient data and tell them that we want to look by the nomenclature rather than the column ID. And so we should see the diabetes and the status object. I do want to come back and look at factors.